Hello everyone. Eto Starheart here, creating another video for all of you to share some metaphysical knowledge and information as we all collectively evolve with the earth in this new age. I hope you're all having a wonderful time whenever and wherever you are as you're watching this video, this broadcast. So, to begin with, I have been inspired to make this video for some time now. Um, this video is going to be about the ego uh, and its relation to human consciousness. I'm going to share some information about what it was and how I see what it is now, and the potentiality for what the ego is to become, and how to begin the process of evolving the ego. Um, yeah, using metaphysical knowledge and information. Um, what really inspired this video, though, I'd like to share is this continuing narrative and rhetoric and relating to the ego that I see in, I would say, the New Age community. I don't really want to say the spiritual community so much, but more so the New Age community. There's this narrative. There's this like way I see a lot of people relate to their ego as they begin to awaken, as they begin to learn more. And it's not even just these people. There's just this narrative in society that individuals really have a very negative view in relation to the ego, to their ego. Uh, and like the way they talk about it, the way they talk about their egos, the way that they relate to their egos. And now I can understand why um, this has come about. But one of the purposes for this video is I wanted to share why I see that's not really relating to the ego in that negative way over and over again isn't really that beneficial or helpful, and it kind of compounds the issues that people have with their egos, really. But before we get into that, I would like to share with all of you what the ego was, um, how it came about, and some history, some metaphysical history, and how the ego was formed in human consciousness that I have learned throughout my studies and practices. And yeah, so the ego, one second, everyone. Let me just make sure this is all working real quick. One second, everyone. So, the ego was, from my understanding, from my research, I mean, years ago, I first came across this concept, as most people come across this concept. It's in psychology, when you're studying psychology. Um, it's a big part of psychoanalytical theory. Um, and it was really purported, it was really shared by Sigmund Freud in his psychological models. And it was part of a set of three concepts in psychoanalytical theory. Um, there's the ego, the id, and the superego, which, if you're going to correlate those to spiritual constructs and concepts, it would be the subconscious relates to the id, the ego relates to the conscious mind, and the superego relates to your higher self or the superconscious. Um, but his theory was describing three distinct interacting agents in the psychic apparatus of the mind, in the psyche. And the three agents are theoretical constructs that describe the activities and interactions of mental life, the mental life of a person. In the psychological model of the psyche, the id is the set of uncoordinated instinctual desires of the being. The superego plays the critical and moralizing role, and the ego is the organized, realistic agent that mediates between the instinctual desires of the id and the critical superego. Um, that is to say, the ego is the conscious mind that mediates between the subconscious and the superconscious. So it is that part of you that uh, is like in charge in this third dimensional reality field that we are all interacting on. Um, just turn this down so it doesn't disturb us as we're going about. So, okay, so that is just in brief because I don't really want to get too in depth with the psychological definitions of the ego. Um, but to better understand this part of us, I will relate it to um, aspects of human consciousness. So, oh, so like I said, the ego would be the conscious mind, the id would be the subconscious mind, and the superego would be the superconscious mind. But we're not going to get into the id or the superego right now. But these concepts were shared in that time because of the you could better understand these concepts and why they were shared like this because of the place that humanity was in their conscious evolution around that time that this came about. Um, People were trying to understand the world around them and their connection to everything. Um, but the ego, in how I see it, the ego is the conscious self that is formulated as a being gains their experiences and interacts with the world in this third dimensional reality field. Now, the thing about the ego is that because of the nature of this third dimensional reality field, well, not necessarily that, but because of the nature of the society that has formed in this third dimensional reality field over thousands of years, the ego has come about and formulated in the way that it has. The conscious mind has come about and formulated in the way that it has. The conscious self. So there is this universe, in part, not to get too deep into it, in part is in a state of fragmentation, um, especially this third dimensional reality field, this 3D field that we all exist in. Now, I'm not going, in this video, I'm not going to share exactly why or how this came about, but you can better understand the ego just keeping that in mind. So we are in part uh, in a state of fragmentation. Human consciousness and the universe at large, the consciousness of the earth, is in a state of fragmentation, in part. So the ego has evolved to the point it has because of this. The part of us, the ego, the conscious mind, has evolved, and the society that we live in has evolved uh, in part in a state of fragmentation. So there is an underlying um, belief within the structure of the ego that believes itself to be separate from everything else, from the other. That is also an expression of the state of fragmentation that we're in. Mm. So So one of the reasons I wanted to share this is when you begin engaging in begin actioning spiritual wisdoms within your own life and experiences, um, especially spiritual wisdoms as spiritual knowledge, when you begin actioning these, especially in regards to unification, there is an inherent, uh, how should I say, redundancy. It doesn't help to continue the idea of fragmentation by denying your ego or by relating to it negatively. So let's backtrack. So when one is born here, you're born here, you come in here, you incarnate here on the earth, and you begin growing up and living your experiences, your set of experiences, learning from your parents, just by observation, learning from your environment, picking up lessons and knowledge for individuals. Um, when you do this in a society that inherently, uh, in a society where each individual inherently believes themselves to be separate from every other thing, then you begin mirroring and reflecting that within yourself. So then your consciousness, your conscious mind fragments and splits and separates and begins believing itself to be separate from another being, from the other being. Um, so this belief continues to be compounded and reflected back by the society that you engage in, that you're engaging in by other individuals. Um, you believe yourself to be separate from your family, you believe yourself to be separate from the environment, you believe yourself to be separate from just everything in the environment. And this belief of separation is solidified, um, in part because of the appearance of this reality field, where everything appears to be separate, as I appear to be separate from this crystal. But if you were to view myself and this crystal, if you were to view yourself and another expression, another aspect of the whole unified field from a higher dimensional view, you would actually see the interconnectedness of yourself and the other. You would see the interconnectedness, the play of energy between myself and this crystal. You would see how this crystal is emitting frequencies of energy and light and vibration, and you'd see how I am also emitting frequencies of light, energy, and vibration, and how these energies play back and forth. Um, that would be a view from a higher dimensional reality field. Because of the nature of this third dimensional reality field at this time, myself and this crystal appear to be separated. It's an appearance. It's an appearance, and this appearance is compounded by the belief, the idea, uh, and the collective belief and the idea that it is separate. Well, personally, I do not believe that myself and this crystal are separate in that sense. There is still a level of separation. Um, but, so I say this as an example. So, as you grow up and go about your experiences in this 3D reality, you believe yourself to be separate. And now this belief begins to this belief travels into your subconscious mind, and that's where it generally sits and rests throughout your life. You subconsciously believe yourself to be separate. So The ego came about, the split in consciousness came about, uh, I want to say, a very, very long time ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago in human evolution and consciousness. Um, because in this earth plane, humanity used to know that it wasn't separate. It used to know inherently, and it was just common knowing and knowledge that you and the other were not separate, even though you were individual expressions of a unified wholeness. Um, you knew consciously that you were not separate. So there really was no there was no ego. There wasn't this structure of the ego. There wasn't this mental concept or structure of the ego. There was just the individual expression of consciousness, the unique expression of consciousness. There was um, the conscious being. There wasn't a subconscious. There wasn't really a super conscious either. There was consciousness and the different dimensions of the expression of life, the universe, source, the creative source, or God. So, but because of certain events um, that occurred here in this plane, uh, consciousness fragmented and split, and then came about the split of the conscious mind, with the superconscious or the higher self, and the subconscious or the lower mind, the conscious mind, and the higher mind. Um, and then later on, as knowledge was lost or hidden, um, the conscious mind started being referred to, or wasn't even referred to, but started being referred to as the egoic consciousness. Um, so to understand the ego, you can say simply that it is the part of the consciousness that believes itself to be separate from everything else. And because this part of yourself believes itself to be separate from everything else, it when you begin engaging in and begin actioning certain spiritual and metaphysical knowledges and practices, um, practices of reunifying your consciousness, um, releasing negative belief systems and patterns, um, this part of your consciousness, depending upon the practice that you're doing, this part of your consciousness um, wants to continue to survive, like any other consciousness or entity or being wants to survive, it wants to live. Um, so certain spiritual practices uh, would have you engage in an ego death. Now, I can tell you now that almost no conscious life wants to die. That's not a desire that uh, that a healthy consciousness has. So your ego is the same. If you your ego is the same. It doesn't want to die. It wants to continue surviving. Um, and this is herein where one here in this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. Um, the way you go about integrating your ego consciousness um, is important, or you're just going to continue, or you may just continue compounding the negative aspects of your ego consciousness, the shadows that you have. Um, so you'll see a lot of narratives as you study spirituality to kill your ego, uh, you may potentially see a lot of narratives. Um, in some spiritual practices or New Age practices, um, to kill your ego, to let it go, to like, your ego needs to die for you to reach a certain level of consciousness or to ascend or something like that. And I personally don't really see that being the case. Rather, there personally, I see a huge difference between um, killing the ego, which would, in from my inner and overstanding, would just compound the fragmentation, um, rather than killing your ego, or yeah, rather than killing your ego, you should rather try to integrate it, integrating your ego into your whole consciousness, into your greater consciousness. I see a huge difference between that, between killing and ridding yourself of the ego, which is the part of you that has grown and formulated here, which is basically your personality, your conscious personality. Rather than killing yourself, you begin integrating yourself. Um, you begin integrating your ego into your greater consciousness, into your higher consciousness, into your lower consciousness. Begin integrating your subconscious mind and your higher conscious mind into your conscious self, into a unified whole. So so then you get back to being a unified and whole conscious being. And this is a process that isn't overnight. Just understanding this concept or this way isn't, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's a metaphysical transformation that needs to happen consciously in every now moment that you you can engage with it. Um, so I would say to begin integrating your ego into your consciousness and to begin integrating your higher self and your subconscious mind into your consciousness. One needs to work out ego pathologies in the now moment. So, an ego pathology is a pattern or a way of being that one has created throughout their life. Um, a negative egoic pathology is a way of being or a pattern that one has created that is in actuality a detriment to one's health or being. Um, so working that out uh, in every conscious moment that you can or when it presents itself um, is important. And by working that out, I mean, so say you've created a pattern in your life. Let me say, okay, so say I smoke cigarettes or something, right? I don't smoke cigarettes, but say I smoke cigarettes and I know consciously that that is unhealthy for me. And say I have been smoking cigarettes for a while, for like a couple years or something like that. So I created an egoic pathology by actioning this. Um, I created a pattern, a negative pattern that's detrimental to my being and my health because everybody knows smoking cigarettes is not healthy for you. Um, uh, Say I started smoking cigarettes for some illusory reason I don't know, because I thought it was nice or something. I felt it was nice, but that's just an illusion, right? So I justified the action by agreeing to the false idea that it was it made me feel good or something like that. So, and I did this over and over and over and over again, and it creates an negative egoic pathology, right? So, a negative pattern. So, to rectify this, to begin reintegrating my ego or my consciousness, um, whenever I work out the path, I work out the pattern. So, so now when my body brings up the sensation of wanting to engage in this action, wanting to smoke a cigarette or something like that, instead of reacting to that impulse, I respond to the impulse with a new choice, with a better choice, with a healthier choice, right? So my body, which it just gained this pattern of, wanting to do this because of the choices I had made. Um, it brings about this impulse, and instead of reacting unconsciously to that pattern, like reacting unconsciously to that pattern, I respond in a new way. So I create a new pattern, um, which would be not smoking a cigarette and I don't know, chewing some gum or something, or doing something better, just breathing, calming myself down, um, calming my mind or my emotions down or something like that, with a different practice, a different action. So then I work out that old pathway by creating a new pathway, and eventually that path is just dissipates. It's gone. Um, that pathology is gone within the ego. So then now my ego, my conscious mind begins to rise to a healthier state. I become healthier, and I'm instead of fragmenting myself, which the fragmentation comes about because the fragmentation would be my part of me believes that that old path is good for you, right? But then there's a part of you, the greater part of you, your higher self or whatever, your heart, your conscious mind knows for a truth and a fact that doing that is actually unhealthy. So then you fragmented, you fragmented. So consciously doing something that you know is misaligned from the truth creates a fragmentation. That is how consciousness continues to fragment. That's one of the ways consciousness continues to fragment. So, like, continuing to do something that is unhealthy for you creates fragmentation within your consciousness. Um, Now, realigning to the truth, realigning to your true resonance, which only really expresses itself as healthy, higher harmonic things. So, like, light things. So realigning with your truth um, will begin to heal that fragmentation and bring your consciousness back. So the part of you that believed um, that those old actions were healthy or whatever, the part of you that was under the illusion that those old patterns were whatever the belief was, begins to return to your greater consciousness, begins to return to your heart, your truth, your center, um, in a healthier state. Yeah. So, so like I said earlier, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video was um, I really think it's a detriment to the ascension of consciousness, or personally, um, for individuals to regard their egos in such a negative way, um, and just like collectively, because the ego is that part of us that we created as beings growing up here on the earth, living and going through our experiences here on the earth. And now, just because we're engaging in practices or beliefs where we realize and know that we're actually whole and unified, doesn't mean that we further the fragmentation by hating on our egos for some reason. What we really should do is to love ourselves, to love our egos, but not in like this inflated, you know, in this inflated way, um, or like, yeah, this illusory way, but in like a true way, like in a healthy way, in a healthy manner, to realize that these are just like, that our egos are just like our children, it's like from a higher dimensional perspective, really. So it's like, it's this part of us that we've created, we've created this part of us while we were experiencing, you know, the earth, living here and stuff like that. And I mean, no healthy individual harms a child, so you really shouldn't harm your ego by, you know, hating on it so much. Um, Rather like lovingly correcting it, correcting your ego, correcting what, so like if a belief or a thought, a negative thought, or if you've done something to harm yourself or another, forgiving yourself, learning to forgive yourself, being willing to forgive yourself for doing that in the past, um, learning to forgive yourself for doing whatever you did in the state that you were, because I can pretty much guarantee uh, most unintegrated egos are unhealthy in a lot of ways. Um, you don't really hate on an unhealthy individual. You give them love and you give them care and you give them your support. Yeah. So to simplify all of that, rather than ragging and hating on your egos, learn to how to healthily love and support your ego, yourself, your personality, and working out those old unhealthy patterns, which we're all just doing individually and collectively. Well, we all might be doing this, but if you're watching this video, you probably are working out and integrating your ego in some way, or engaged in some metaphysical practice in some manner. But yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for watching this. Yeah, I am going to be engaged, along with this, loving yourself. This coming month in February, I'm going to be engaging in a month long, but I can foresee it being like a year long, potentially a lifelong practice of self love and loving myself more. Where basically you ask yourself in any given situation or when you have to make a decision, what would someone who loves themselves do in this situation? And then we like journal about it and stuff like that. Uh, this is part of Teal Swan's self love challenge for February, so you can go check that out at her stuff. Um, Wherever she posts her stuff. But yeah, so learn to love yourself more, everyone. As we raise in consciousness, as we raise and ascend ourselves and the earth collectively, uh, it's going to be really important learning how to realistically and healthily love ourselves in any little or big way that we can see. Yes. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for joining me. Leave a comment if you found this informative, if you liked the content I made, if you didn't like the content I made, whatever's cool. I like discussions. Yeah, like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can all learn more and expand our consciousness together. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Peace, love, and centeredness. And I will see you again on the next video. Bye now.